I was thinking I could perhaps share a story from when I was really young. I couldn't find any other place to tell it. This story took place in my childhood home, small, old and concrete on the end of a suburb at the edge of my city. Behind it there were around 2 houses and then a lake, tons of trees and plant life spurred in the gaps. This house was built by my great-grandfather and the place still makes me sweat thinking about it. For like 2 years after moving I had reoccurring nightmares about either being mauled by twisted animals or by twisted versions of my own family members. I was around 7 when this happened. After spending 5 hours staring at my ceiling, it started to become worse. Just like hearing the sound of the wind made my heart pound and feel like my chest was going to cave in. A chill deeper than the sea ran over me before I started walking to my grandmother's room. After creaking open the door and creeping in I saw that there was no one there. At 4 in the morning, and no recollection of anyone telling me she was going. This hit me like a punch in the throat. I feebly attempted to let out a scream, letting out just a meek noise of fear. And then hauled ass over the entire expanse of my entire house, past my grandfather's hunting trophies, where only the teeth were illuminated, from wolves, deer, zebra etc. Making it to my mother's room I felt like I was going to vomit out of fear. This all happened in a span of 1 to 2 minutes. After probably firing open the door to her room, I ripped off the duvet and saw there was no one there as well. Then I honest to God don't remember what happened next. I just remember standing alone in some of the foliage in front of my house. Not even wearing shoes. Like I just appeared there. I ran through the painful jabbing of the sticks to my soles and started banging the door and probably holding in the doorbell. And that's when I think my mother opened the door. And I think the rest of the night was just spent comforting me in a shell-shocked state on the couch, all lights turned on and TV tuned to my favorite channel. And that's just that specific incident. I never sleepwalked in my entire life, I could barely even open the front door at the time. Or never any instances that I remember, and definitely not as strong as the one would have had to be during then. Another time I was sitting in my grandmother's bed, probably around the same age. She had a TV on a shelf by the ceiling. Sitting there, I was just watching some late-night children's entertainment from my home country. Late night in this case probably means 10 or something. It hits me incredibly unexpected when the lights shut off, but the TV, being the only source of light, starts ominously turning to static. This Icelandic dubbed Scooby-Doo or something starts warping and distorting. Like it's losing signal. Then it shuts off. I was halfway screaming at this point but complete silence washed over me when I saw something glowing green in the corner. The corner of the ceiling by the TV. It starts growing and expanding, shining what I remember was a dull green light. After this was going on for 3 to 4 seconds, I ran to the door and sprinted to the end of the house to the living room. I sat with my parents on the couch for 10 minutes before trying to go there again. Everything was in the correct order, lights on, TV turned on and tuned correctly. And that's all I think I remember of the story. I would call this all up as bizarre nightmares if I didn't have consecutive reoccurring ones several years after moving. This type of shit only happened in that house. And then there was one time the house tried to kill my grandmother. So I remember this was after my grandfather died, just around a year earlier. We were planning to move in a few months, so my grandmother was tidying up the garage. She told me that when entering the garage she saw an enormous gray moth by the door to the garage. It was a bright sunny day when she walked in. The garage would have been simmering if she hadn't opened the door all the way. She walks by the stacks of boxes and is about to walk past a steam valve controlling the heaters in our home. About when walking by it she trips on something small. While falling she hears a loud metallic creaking and a faint hissing. Turning around to face the sound she saw that the steam valve had burst. If she hadn't tripped she would have been scalded by a boiling hot spray. Looking to the ceiling in either horror or relief, she saw the same gray moth on the ceiling of the garage. It was several years later that I learned that large moths in most cultures symbolize a deceased loved one and is said to be them coming to visit once again. And that's the story as I can recollect her telling me. My mother and grandmother were really spiritual. They had sigils and gems and shit, things to talk to spirits. And I don't think that mixed all too well with the various animal heads my grandpa owned and we kept for years after his departure. My grandpa was an Indiana Jones type. Kept all sorts of artifacts and shit from various countries. Egypt, China, Saudi Arabia, Tibet. Lots of things from various cultures. Maybe it was a bad mix of bold spiritual experimentation and animal carcasses. Maybe it was some sort of funny artifact. But one thing I do remember, whatever it was, it sure loved scaring the shit out of me. It was very primal, something very animalistic. Most of the nightmares I had involved some sort of animal or primal instruments. He also had a bunch of things from Africa, fetish dolls, beast fangs, masks, instruments. I think I have one more story that I just remembered. I was sleeping in my grandmother's room with the door to the hall open. I had a nightmare which started off as a regular dream. I was descending into a large pit. Very jungle-like foliage all around me. As I delved deeper, the light from the surface started to dim, or it started to turn dark in the dream. As I went deeper, I tripped into the hole and was falling down deeper into a very large space. The walls of the pit turned to a ceiling, revealing a large space, almost pitch black. And then as I fell into the center of it, I saw a large horse-like and skeletal entity hover me in the palm of its hand. It stared directly at me and I woke up. As I woke up in a cold sweat, I turned to try and wake up my grandmother. No one was there. In this pitch darkness in the room and from the open door to the hall, I heard a loud reversed laugh of a woman. I sat there like a sentry eyeing the hallway until my grandmother came back. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. And that's the story.